Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play The Adventures of Batman and Robin 1994. In the last part we went through a couple more stages and now it's time for Trouble in Transit, my least favorite stage in the game. Okay, you mugs, let's go! This is Summer Gleason. There has been a robbery at the Gotham City Bank. The criminals fled the scene by car. We have received unconfirmed reports that the ringleader is none other than the infamous Two-Face. Batman! We'll go after them in the Batmobile. So this is notably the only stage in the game where you don't have to select your equipment because we're in the Batmobile this entire time, and frankly, this stage sucks. It doesn't suck to control in theory. It effectively controls like some of the old Micro Machines games used to on the NES. But you gotta make very sudden turns. They warn you which direction you're gonna turn beforehand. You might want to actually go to the opposite extreme of the road to help give you some extra room for the turn. But you also want to brake into the turns and then speed away, as going full speed you'll probably bump into the side of the road and that'll make you lose time. Bumping into a car also makes you lose time. The thing is, that timer is why this stage sucks. As for this first section here, it is extraordinarily strict. I think at most you can maybe bump into the side of the road a couple times, but at most I think you can hit a car once. They could have added an extra 15 or so seconds to this and it would have been fine. The unfortunate thing is the first half is really rough, but I genuinely think the second half of the stage is pretty fun and it's just so much more generous with what you can get away with. Okay, you mugs, let's go. So in Phase 2, we're going to be chasing the car more directly. Batman, let's hurry! Okay, come on. But now we can actually destroy things in our way, we can actually use the guns on the Batmobile. You just use the attack button to spam that. Thankfully, any car we destroy here is, I guess, theoretically filled with Two-Face's grunts, as otherwise we're committing extreme wanton murder. You still have a timer to worry about here, but between the turns being nowhere near as sharp and the distance you have to cover, it is so much easier to make this than it is the first half or so. Mind you, I say that. If memory serves, I actually ended this section with about the same amount of time left on the timer, but I also hit a lot more cars in this section, so I think that shows just how much more time you can get here versus how much time I had left in the first half. This stage in concept isn't horrible, but I just feel like they could have executed it in so much more better ways, give you more time and you would have been fine and all that. As it is just my least favorite stage in the game far and away. Found them! There it is! Good. Hold on tight. So, boss fight of this stage is Two-Fight and his grunts in the car. To start, it only really has an attack where he drops a bomb behind you or he tries to run into you outwardly for damage, but occasionally he will slow down and put you in front of him, at which point his attack becomes firing a missile at you that is marked with the reticle on screen. But your attack also switches from guns while doing so to bombs itself, so you're effectively just trading places and seeing who kills who first. With the amount of life you can lose in this stage if you're not careful, this can be potentially difficult, but as long as you're good about kind of waggling back and forth to avoid the bombs he's dropping, it's far and away one of the easiest bosses in the game, despite the stage it's attached to. Mind you, you could look at the fact you can't get this boss into an easy lock as it being one of the hardest bosses in the game, and by that metric you would technically be correct, honestly. But if anything, it also is one of the more interesting bosses because of that as well, because you're always on your toes. Thankfully, from my memory, too, it's also one of the bosses that has the least amount of health overall in the game, because we're only in this fight for about, what, a minute and a half, if even. Now, it's been a couple days since I recorded the first two parts, so forget if I said this exactly in those earlier two parts. But this stage is one of the biggest examples of what I think about this game overall, where it has some really high highs, but some really lows, as it's just such a pain. With that, though, Two-Face is out of the way, so it's time for our next stage. Who's our villain of the week, you might ask? Well, Perchance to Scream has a pretty obvious answer. This is Summer Gleason. I'm standing here in front of the reception hall where a party is being held in honor of the Gotham State University's professors. There's a great sense of uneasiness here due to the presence of a large blimp in the sky. Just what is this strange, mysterious blimp? This must be the work of Scarecrow. What do you mean, sir? He's got a grudge against the university. He's been planning his revenge, and now he's going to use that blimp for one of his gruesome experiments. Gruesome experiments? Gas. One whiff, and even the most upright citizen can be turned into a criminal. He plans to spray it from the air. Well then, please be careful, Master Bruce. If the text in that cutscene wasn't enough, you really want to make sure you bring the gas mask into this stage. I'm not sure if you can beat it without it. There's probably a way for you to do so, but if so, it's probably a pain in the ass. I really like this song. Everyone, get out of here. Scarecrow is on his way. Ah, crap. You're too late, Batman. Now they see you as the enemy. Unfortunately, you can't hit innocent people, can you? So this stage has two mechanics going on to it. For one thing, there's gas in some rooms. If you don't have the gas mask on, you're gonna take damage. But also, there's citizens who are slowly sprinting after you need to watch out for. To begin with, I don't think you can attack them, at least I've never tried to, but the thing you need to watch out for is that if they get too close to you, they will grab you, leaving you very open to attack from either the standard enemies trying to punch you, or especially the ones trying to shoot you with either their Tommy guns or their handguns, so watch out for that. This is one of the rooms you really want to have your gas mask in, because otherwise you'll take damage from the gas. You might be able to get around through it by just rolling around and all that, given it only goes so low, but frankly, I've always brought the gas mask in because of that cutscene, so I'm not entirely certain. So since this first section's largely a lot of platforming and beating up enemies, let's get back to talking about the sound and music team we started off last time. The second person listed in it is Masanari Iwata. This is actually their first project. After this, they worked on the Super Nintendo version of Rondo of Blood, Castlevania Dracula X that I've already done an LP on. They were sound design on that. They were a sound designer on one of the SNES Parodius games, as well as one on the PlayStation. Afterwards, their next three projects listed, that are the last three we know about as far as Moby Games is concerned, were on International Superstar Soccer 98 and 2000. After them is Masahiko Kimura. Their first project was this, as well as being in the special thanks section of Aero Fighters 2 on the Neo Geo. After this, they also worked in the sound design for Dracula X, but unlike the previous person, they went in a different direction, usually doing either sports games like NBA Give and Go, or working on the Super Nintendo Goemon games. Come the N64 era, they were the composer for both Castlevania and Legacy of Darkness. But after that, their notable projects are doing the composition for Suikoden 4, as well as the soundtrack to the original and second Spectrobes games. Games that, again, I think I mentioned last time, are near and dear to my heart, as they're the games that got me my DS. The next person after them in the credits is Kaio Fujitani. This is their only credit on Moby Games at the least. Between now and the second pass, we'll see if I can find anything else. There's them grabbing me, by the way. If you've found these citizens annoying to deal with up at this point in the stage, well, good news, you're done with them after this particular screen's over. From here on out, it's just pretty straightforward to the end of the stage, barring, I think, arguably the worst series of platforming the game has to offer. It's quick, but if you're not good with it, it will kill you a lot. Ah, there's my plane. Batman, it's me, Robin. Hurry, jump on. Robin. All right, I understand. The Batplane cannot get close enough to the blimp. You'll have to use your grappling hook to get aboard. I know you can do it. But of course. So before we get onto the blimp, we need to dodge some balloons with the Batplane itself. Similarly to the bombs during the roller coaster section with Joker's stage at the start of the game, sticking towards the right side of the screen and ducking over medium ones, jumping over low ones, and outright just avoiding high ones is a good thing to do around here. I have gotten hit here several times, but honestly, it's pretty easy to get through without getting touched. Afterwards, we're just going to need to deal with some enemies on top of the blimp as we move towards the left. But what really sucks about this section, the worst platforming in the game to me, is that as Robin said, we have to use our grappling hook to get into the plane. And what they mean by that is into the cockpit at the bottom of it. As we move to the left, we're going to reach the point where, the blimp curves around. You need to grappling hook diagonally and swing to the right like 5-6 times in a row, and it is awkward as hell. especially with how I do it in this playthrough, because if memory serves, I just shoot it straight up and bounce to the right several times, because frankly, I just don't like how the grapple swinging feels in this game, especially given how few times you actually have to use it. If the game had more of a focus on it, I think this could have been pretty comfortable. But because the game focuses on so many different things throughout its stages, this doesn't get enough time for it to really become comfortable to do. Getting back to the sound team, though, the next person listed is Harumi Ueko. Their first project was Gyrus on the NES on the sound creation team. They were also a sound editor for Gradius 3 on the sound team for Legend of the Mystical Ninja on the NES, on the sound design team for TMNT 4 on the Super Nintendo, as well as Tournament Fighter on the Super Nintendo. And get this, Batman Returns on the Super Nintendo. They also did, again, sound design for Dracula X, which admittedly, that port has a lot of stage design issues. The music composition is generally still pretty good. They did the music for Gradius 4 as well as Jurassic Park 3 in the arcade, funnily enough. But after the turn of the millennium, they largely did music games like DDR Supernova as a special thanks thing, and they were in Beatmania 2DX15 DJ Troopers as a new song composer. Goodbye, Batman. Scarecrow, wait! How did you fit that in here? Now, I've never been inside of a blimp, because I don't like flying to begin with, but to my knowledge, those cockpit areas aren't very large. I caught up with you, Scarecrow. You again. You're always interfering with my plans. I won't forgive you again. I won't forgive you either. Scarecrow can be deceptively rough, but he has a pretty similar pattern you can abuse like Joker. He tries to hit you with effectively a three-way spread shot from Contra, but if you hit him with a batarang before he can get it off, you stun him long enough that you can walk over and punch him, at which point he'll jump away, and he'll attempt to do the same thing. Doing this compared to the Joker lock is a little more precise, because if you're too early or too late with your punches, you'll just get either blasted with a gun in the face, or he'll attack you outright with a physical whack. But this is still a relatively easy lock to keep him into. The big thing to worry about at that point is your health. Getting back to the people in the sound team, the next person listed is Masahiro Ikariko. Their first projects are King's Valley 2 on the MSX on the sound team, as well as being one of the composers for Snatcher on the MSX. They also composed for Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, which I love that soundtrack, Parodius on the Sharp 68000, TMNT 4 the Hyperstone Heist, they were a sound designer, as well as the TurboGrafx version of Snatcher. They did the sound design for the Super Nintendo version of Twin Bee, as well as the Genesis version of Sunset Riders, composed for this, composed for Police Knots, basically across all of its releases. But their most recent releases overall, they did the soundtrack for things like Silent Hill the arcade, Akamoto Dracula the arcade, and GTI Club Super Mini Festa. And gee, I wonder who the villain in Riddle Me This is going to be. Batman, how are you? The other day I presented the completed version of my Maze of the Minotaur cyberspace game to the police department. But somehow the police commissioner's daughter seems to have become lost in it. It appears that she'll be in there forever. Unless you think that you are clever enough to solve my little labyrinth. Do you care to give it a try? I'll use this computer to network with the one at the police station. I should be able to access Maze of the Minotaur from here. Yes, Master Bruce. Don't forget to prepare first. You may need to blast through some walls. He is not joking. You want to bring in your plastic explosives as well as your X-ray goggles to be able to tell which walls you can destroy. Also, wow, Riddler literally just told us to solve his maze. Oh, if only we knew. Welcome, Batman, to my own private cyberspace. Welcome to the Maze of the Minotaur. If you can solve the riddles of this maze, I'll free Police Commissioner Gordon and Barbara. Good luck. You'll need it. So this is a labyrinth, but thankfully, unlike the Penguin stage, it's completely set as to where goes where. Fun little thing is, too, they have a pretty well-made animation for actually rotating around in the map. There are dead ends here, but thankfully they don't usually place a lot of enemies at the end of them. In fact, sometimes there's health. When it comes to using the plastic explosives as a sub-weapon, you do just throw them, but you can tell which walls you can destroy if you use the X-ray scope, and they're completely transparent. Otherwise, you're going to just be throwing your plastic explosives at everything until it actually destroys something, and at that point, you're just wasting your explosives, albeit there is still ammo to find here and again, as I said earlier. So the final person listed in the sound team is Kazuhiko Uehara. Their first role was as the sound effects person in Vampire Killer for the MSX, that weird version of Castlevania 1. Afterwards, they did some conversion for the MSX version of Snatcher. F1 Spirit Road to Formula 1, they did sound team stuff there. Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, they were composer. Gradius 3, they were a sound editor once again. Mystical Ninja on the Super Nintendo, they were on the sound team. Buster Butts Loose on the SNES, they were on the sound team. Same with Turtles in Time and Parodius. Sunset Riders, Pop and Twinbee, a lot of the same games we've heard already from these other people on the sound team. Very well then, riddle me this, Batman. What is the shortest distance between a point in Nome, Alaska, and a point in Miami, Florida? Well, you might think it's going to be the straight line, but let's remember this is the Riddler, there's a twist to this. Because there are 2 points on Earth, no matter where you go, you are moving around a sphere, thus it's going to be the curve. If you get the question wrong, I believe you're just teleported to a separate dead end elsewhere in the maze. I don't think I've gotten that one wrong in a long time though, so if I don't exactly remember why, don't blame me. Very good! But it's easy once you realize the Earth is round. Getting back to Kazuhiko Uehara, post the late 90s, they started to work on a lot more sports games, like NBA Zone 98, 99, the ESPN games that Konami put out, Disney sports games back when. But when they weren't a chief sound producer, they eventually just became a chief producer for a lot of games like Evolution Snowboarding, MLB Bros. 2000, Power Pros 2008 rather. But their most recent credits that are noteworthy are in the special thanks section of Castlevania Lords of Shadow, which, if that's not indicative of where Konami eventually went. Mind you, I say that like there's not jokes in games like Snatcher about how terrible Konami management was, so that was a consistent thing across most of that company's history, even if the creatives got to make some really good projects in the meanwhile. Then we start getting to the really interesting credits, which are namely the animator set and the cleanup set, because as far as I can tell, the way this game was developed was they animated these characters like they were proper cells and then just drew sprites over them, effectively. So a lot of these people actually have real practice in the animation industry in Japan, especially at the time. Starting off, let's talk about their game history, though. There's Yoko Matsuda, who worked on this, Psychic Detective Series Volume 3 Aya and Clock Tower 3. Hiroyuki Takahashi, who worked on this, Last Imperial Prince, and then started Pokemon Battle Revolution, would often be in the 3D graphics and motion design section for Pokemon moving through into the 3DS era. Who, as far as I can tell, is not the same Hiroyuki Takahashi that founded Camelot Software, by the way. There's Hideto Kamioka, who worked on that same Psychic Detective series, as well as Strikers 1945 and Soul Divide. Miharu Ito, who only worked on this, and Yasuhiro Takemoto, who worked on this in Dancing Blade. Choose a key, you want to choose C. I actually forget where the hint is that you get for that, unless it's maybe when you screw up. That's right! In music, the C key has no sharps, the A has 3, and the D has 2. You're putting up quite a good fight. Why, thank you. I am known as a master detective for a reason. Now, a bunch of those animators do share some other projects, namely a Crayon Shin-Chan movie and a Doraemon movie, though people like Hiroyuki Takahashi also worked on things like Amagi Brilliant Park, Full Metal Panic, Lucky Star, Sound Euphonium, and all that. Very sad note about that set of animators, though, is that we've actually lost one of them due to a very specific event. Yasuhiro Takemoto, assuming I have the right person there, which, based on my research as far as I can tell, I do, is unfortunately one of the animators we lost in the Kyoto Animation arson attack about half a decade back. I think about that event every now and then, and it just pisses me off every time I think about it because of the extreme damage that one asshole did because he thought that someone plagiarized his work, which ended up not being the case as far as I remember research being done on it. That such a loss of genuine talent and artistry. Not discounting the issues the anime industry admittedly has, though, but that's largely a topic for a different video, I find. Let's get back to the game itself for now. Moving on to the next set, which is where I believe the 2D animation those animators did was turn into sprites, is the cleanup step. Within this, we got Muneharo Samajima, Yukito Komori, Yutaka Nagishi, Takayuki Ando, Jun Asami, and Reiko Hagiwara, as well as a Minotaur. This is the final riddle. I have billions of eyes.
yet I live in the darkness. I have millions of ears, yet only 4 lobes. I have no muscles, yet I rule 2 hemispheres. What am I?
Awkwardly, you do have to input the acronym for what this answer is, but the answer is HB for human brain. Oh my god, they disintegrated. HB? Human brain?
It has billions of optic and auditory nerves,
4 lobes and 2 hemispheres. And it is the only thing Edward Nygma respects. Ah, curses! I'm impressed. Minotaur, show them your power. So the Minotaur will slowly jaunt towards you and swing its sword every here and again. You just need to hit it a shitload. Its swing does hurt a lot more than most other attacks in the game, so if it gets too close to you, you do need to use the wall jump off the walls to avoid it. And if memory serves about how this boss works, it doesn't turn around until it hits the wall, so it's probably actually safest to jump around it at about the 4/5 mark of it walking across and then hit it from behind and then just keep away until you can do that again. Once we do this, though, we're not done with the stage, but we are done with what I would consider the easy part of the stage. Also, I do like that the map makes a riddle in the middle. Well, you've made it this far, but everything before was just a test. The real game begins now. Oh god, I hate nightmares like this. How about a relaxing game of chess? Anything you do is just a waste of time. So now we got chess pieces to deal with. Pawns will whack from the background with their spears. There's going to occasionally be rooks that'll jump from a specific colored tile to specific colored tile. If it starts on orange, it'll jump to the next orange. If it starts on blue, vice versa. Eventually, though, we are going to have to deal with a little bit more here. In fact, these rooks don't even do anything, technically. By and large, the knights do nothing, though. They are just there for set dressing in the background. But now Riddler's here. Now I'll present you with something I think you'll get a real charge from. Now Riddler's gonna be messing with us directly, trying to destroy the tiles in front of us as we go, let alone some just crumbling beneath us. Falling down in that is instant kill, but he'll also just destroy some outright with finger lasers. This is where we're gonna need to eventually deal with the rooks that are bouncing from place to place. Getting into that cleanup team though, Muneharu Samajima, their first project was Quarth in the arcade and the visual effects team. They then worked on Aliens in the arcade as a special guest. Bucky O'Hare in the arcade, they were in the special thanks, as well as this, of course. But their most prevalent credit is probably as a special guest in the Simpsons arcade game. Yukiti Komori, they worked on this. Tokimeki Memorial 1 as a video converter. Sui Koden as a movie editor, as well as Gradius, Deluxe Pack, and Snatcher for dot graphics drawers, which is the main reason I actually think a lot of these people are just people who took the 2D animation that was done by the prior mentioned animation team and then converted it into sprites. This is Yutaka Nagishi's first project, but after this, they largely worked on things with Kojima directly. They were the director of the VR training mode of Metal Gear Solid. They designed the maps for VR missions. They did background stuff for Metal Gear Solid 2, as well as some stuff for Zone of the Enders Second Runner. Lead artist for Metal Gear 3, lighting director for Peace Walker and all that. Why you? You forced me to show you what's up my sleeve. If you're ready, then come here and fight. Despite his devilish grin in the distance, we're actually fighting 2 king chess pieces in this boss fight. He'll raise one, get it over you, slam it down. That can instant kill you as far as I remember. But you can only damage each king piece separately and only when they're rising up into the sky. And when you destroy one, the pattern does notably change a good bit. Going for jump kicks is obviously your best bet here. Whenever there's one left, he'll have one chase you every here and there, in which case he'll either destroy a platform in front of you like he did earlier to trap you, or he'll have the king piece try to push you into it. Otherwise, though, the boss doesn't change that much besides that. Getting back to Yutaka Nagishi, their most recent credit that's not a special thanks of a re-release is in Metal Gear Rising as a 3D CG advisor. Afterwards, we got Takayuki Ando. This is once again their first project, and they worked on the Saturn version of Snatcher. They were a background designer for Silent Hill, and they kept staying with that series moving forward on Team Silent, working on the town design and modeling for Silent Hill 2, Neo Contra, they were the director for Nano Breaker, they were the special thanks. Their most recent projects are in a special thanks role in Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth, and Contra Operation Galuga as special thanks once again. Next up with Jun Asami, this is their first project. They were then on the Saturn team for Snatcher once again, and they were a graphic designer for Gradius Gaiden. And wrapping out this team is Reiko Hagiwara. This is once again their first project. They were then on the CG team for Police Knots on the 3DO specifically. They were a 3D graphic modeler for Snatcher on the Saturn, as well as CG again for Police Knots on the Saturn. But their most recent role is as an effects person on the first Zone of the Ender, so we haven't seen anything from them directly in a good while. I've always found the end of this stage kind of weird, though, because even compared to the other stage, it's a little abrupt, because as we defeat this king piece, Riddler's just gonna fade away, and that means he technically got away compared to the other villains. This stage is really neat, honestly. It's a lot better on repeat playthroughs because you don't have to worry about wandering the maze as much, but I think this is the better version of the Penguin stage overall. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, we're gonna go finish off the game. See you guys then.